Welcome aboard. We're Paddy and Esme, and this is Peggy. We recently decided to sell up our lives and move onto a sailing boat. We're dreaming of crossing oceans, but there's a lot of work to do in the meantime. We're super excited to be on YouTube and officially kick off our channel. We hope you enjoy following our adventures. Let's go! Good morning, it's the end of March 2023 and we've been living on Moonlighting now for just coming up to 3 months. We're feeling a bit more settled in now and I think it's a really good time to bring you guys up to speed and explain to you how we got here. For that I'm going to need Paddy, who's next door, so we'll go grab some coffees and sit down to talk you through it. So how do we get here? Last summer we were fresh off a sailing trip in the Channel Islands with some friends and family, and when we got back to Bristol we had this crazy idea. We basically wanted to do this full time. It felt really unrealistic and it felt like a bit of a dream. We'd just bought a flat in Bristol and we both worked full-time jobs and it didn't feel very achievable. Next thing we know, the cost of living crisis started to rear its ugly head and Paddy picked up the idea again and started to research whether or not it was possible for us to live on a boat while still working our full-time jobs and be in Bristol. So we found a marina and we realised that actually we could do it. So we put our flat up on the market as quickly as we could and sold our van and started looking for a boat. We should probably rewind a bit here as this story starts a lot earlier. Maybe not that far. Paddy and I met in 2019 and quickly realised we shared ambitions to live a bit differently and have as many adventures as possible. When the pandemic struck, we used the time to convert a van and spent much of the next 18 months living on the road. We used this time to climb and learn to surf and explore whenever the rules would allow us to.
In summer 2020, we did a van tour of France and came across the boat my grandparents had lived on for 18 years. To cut a long story short, coming across this piece of family history inspired my family to club together and buy a boat. Since then, Esme and I have been super fortunate to spend loads of time sailing together, which sowed the seed of buying a bigger boat and becoming full-time cruisers. So how do we go about choosing a boat? So first of all, we thought of all the things that we were non-negotiable for us, and the 4 top things were that she was heavy enough to be big and safe out at sea. We wanted to have enough space inside for 4 adults to live comfortably for long periods of time. We also thought it was quite important that she wasn't super slow, because we know the difference between travelling at 4.5 knots and 5.5, 6 knots, and it's actually quite a lot over a long period of time. And finally, we wanted as much kit as possible to be included with her, you know, things like solar panels and water tanks and water makers and anything that's possible that makes a big difference to the overall price of doing up a boat. So we felt really fortunate that we were the first to view Moonlighting. She felt like she ticked loads of our boxes, particularly her like big solid build, and she'd just been across the Atlantic with a young family and was previously owned by a professional skipper, so a lot of the really important stuff had been really well kept. There were lots of compromises, but she felt like the one for us, so we put in an offer and we were really ecstatic to have it accepted. So the next big challenge was that she was in Plymouth and we were in Bristol. It was also October when we bought her, which is when the weather starts to turn in England and summer days were turning into rainy, windy, horrible conditions out at sea, so we didn't have very long to get her around here. When we finally arrived in Portishead, we then only had 2 months between us having to move out of our flat and moving onto the boat full time. So we spent every evening and weekend down here painting the inside of the boat, getting her ready to move on full time. We sold all of our furniture and had to downsize our lives and then waved goodbye to the flat. So since then, we've been basically getting into the swing of living on board. We've got loads of work left to do before we can go sailing this summer. So let me bring you up to speed with what we've been working on over the last few weeks.
Paddy has just started drilling a hole inside of the boat.
It's going to be waterproof, probably. Hopefully a nice neat hole. This is a combination of slightly alarming factors between electricity, water, drilling a hole in the boat and not falling in is quite a lot to think about. That's straight.
Oh my god.
Hello. I'm nearly finished fitting the exhaust, so which runs out of the heater in this cupboard, down and under and out the back here. So I'm just fitting this insulatory sleeve on over the silencer.
Cool.
And pinning it all down. And then there's just the fuel lines and electrics to fit, and then we have a heater. We got heat! I can hear the pump ticking away. You probably can't hear. So one of the challenges that I've got doing this ceiling is it's like the underside of the bench above in the cockpit, and it's pretty thin fiberglass, so it gets really cold. It's like having condensation plate just across the whole ceiling. So when I took the old ceiling down, there's this horrible gunge and like build up of loads and loads of moisture over years back behind the headboard and behind the foam there. So it's a real trap for condensation. So I'm worried it's gonna get super damp. So I've basically layered insulation and taped, sealed all the gaps as much as I can. It's not gonna be water and air tight, but hopefully it's gonna make quite a big difference and stop the water from dripping through onto the paneling below and causing it to warp. So I finished building this last night, so it's now got nice wood paneling in here, and I had to kind of like work out a way to get these panels so they kind of looked relatively neat, but they were easy to remove, because the above here is like the underside of all the winches and then also the ignition. So these are, you know, quite often I expect that we will have to take these down to do some servicing. I've waterproofed the back of all of these with PVA. There's insulation foil behind them, and then now you just take this, unscrew this batten off, and these should all just come out quite easily, like slide out, so it's not lots of screws to undo which can damage the heads over time. So quite pleased with it. Still needs to be sanded back and a bit of filler around, and then I'll paint it white with the rest of the room. Pretty dark in here because I've had to take the light out, but I'm just about to tape myself in, try and like not get dust all over the stuff. So that's the challenge of living on a boat whilst you're renovating it. But yeah, I'll lock myself in and then sand all this varnish back so it takes the primer and the paint, so it's gonna be nice and white in here.
Sandy boy.
I've done more enjoyable jobs in my time. Is that in my eyes?
You're so dirty. Turn around, do us a 360. Oh wow.
Oh
yeah.
God, like I'm stepping it into the car. But I was about to go get the Hoover. Might better if you get me the Hoover.
I can get you the Hoover. So that's what we've been up to in the last few months. We hope you enjoyed our first episode. Please hit like and subscribe to follow our adventures, and check out our TikTok and Instagram channels to see more regular updates. See you next time.